Hello and welcome to the Geek Show, and let's talk about Little Nightmares 2. This review is based on a code that was provided to us for the PS4 copy, and all of the footage is from our playthrough, which comes pretty early on in the game. Now, what is Little Nightmares 2? It's a follow-up to the 2017 original, published by Bandai Namco and developed by the Swedish studio from Malmö, Tarsier Studios. And in it, it's a suspense adventure. It errs a lot more towards horror, in which you play as Mono, a young boy trapped in a world that has been distorted by the humming transmission of a distant tower. With Six, the girl in a yellow raincoat, as his guide, Mono sets out to discover the dark secrets of the signal tower and save Six from her terrible fate. But their journey will not be a straightforward one, as Mono and Six will face a gallery of new threats from terrible residents of the world. Okay, so here's the question that is immediate for me, and it's pertinent because I never played the first one, so I thought when we got this in, am I the right person to review this? Because, you know, it's a sequel, you have to have a base level of knowledge for the world that it's set in, otherwise it's just going to go over your head. And honestly, that's not the case. Partly because it's kind of a atmosphere piece, Little Nightmares. It's an atmosphere piece involving very light story and a series of scenarios. That being said, if you play the original, you'll get more from it because the little references, the characters will make more sense. There'll be more relevance to them, naturally, but it's not absolutely essential. There's still plenty to get out of this, even if you haven't played the first one. And I tried to play the first one, but I bounced off it pretty badly, I think. Fundamentally, the reason for that is, as it starts, it was kind of alienating, really. It didn't do a great job of establishing the challenge and building you up and setting you up in the world. It just kind of dropped you in from the neck into the deep end, and I know people appreciate that, but when it's a world of such rich atmosphere, of such rich ideas, and horrible scenarios, you really want to see it from afar, if that makes sense. You don't want to... Yeah, there we go. You can't see the forest for the trees. That was what I think the issue with the pacing with the first one was. Whereas, here, in the second one, you start as Mono, and as the game opens, you're asleep next to a TV, I believe, in the middle of the woods, and you just walk from left to right. Little challenges early on in the game. There's light puzzles, there's light platforming. A lot of the puzzles revolve around environment manipulation, because we're in a post-apocalyptic world in which everything's falling apart, so you've got to find holes in parts of the environment, push things around, pull things, throw things at other things. It's not incredibly taxing. It's more paying attention to the environment, and those early phases in the woods really establish that, which I appreciated because it introduces you to the world with a very clean and clear narrative, a very clean and clear case of pacing. And then it drops in the first Mega Human. Now here's a question for people who've played it. Are you really small and they're really big, or are you normal sized and they're humongous? Just asking. I mean, if you can answer that in the comments, I would appreciate that, because I never quite got that aspect of this. However, yeah, when you see that first guy, I understood implicitly what the stakes were in this game, where the tension from this game comes. It's a skin-crawling experience. This is just the first one as well, which is kind of just setting it up so it's not like truly nasty like some of the later ones are. But this first one, you understand the world, you understand how the game is presented. It's not about jump scares, because I don't think there's actually... Well, it's jump scares in the sense of later in the game anyway, where you thought you'd got to a place which was safe, and then the game just disabuses you of that notion, which, along with the atmosphere, which is one of constant ambience, really, but it makes great use out of chittering things happening in the background. Little noises in the background, groans of the woods, groans of the buildings. And when the score does come in, like when a monster hears you, a humanoid monster, or whatever you want to call them, hears you, and there's like these groans of the orchestra, of screaming of the strings, it sets, I mean, I don't know how other people appreciate something which really scares them in a movie or a game, but when it happens to me, the hairs on my arm stick an end, and this was doing it quite constantly. And as it goes on, it establishes new aspects. So once you get past the first one, it throws you in the first challenge in the woods, with something that can only be described as Texas Chainsaw Massacre-like. It throws you into a school scenario. I won't go further than this because it's still pretty early on. And honestly, the way that school scenario is set up, in the way it escalates, the things it throws at you, the things it develops as far as the Little Nightmares formula. Because in this one, it has action. And even though the timing of the action, just to give it a bit of context, you meet these porcelain little kids who are horrifying. There's a scene where you walk through a kitchen and there's hundreds of the little beggars. And again, skin crawling. Absolutely skin crawling. But you have to attack them when they're in small numbers, and you get like a hammer, a ladle, something like this, some implement for defending yourselves. And they move very quickly and almost unpredictably, and you're throwing your weight around with this weapon in a very slow-laboured way. So that's a little bit annoying, but the way it escalates that challenge, the way it establishes these little notes in this school level, and the boss, or the monster humanoid character, is genuinely... It makes me frightened of quaint middle-class teachers. I mean, it's kind of like Nurse Ratched, I guess, but not. But yeah, it really does put the fear of God into it, that whole segment. And I genuinely adored that whole passage. And I tweeted this at the time, that if the game improves upon that as a moment where it's all about horror, all about tension, all about suspense, we're talking about one of the best horror games since Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I won't explain why it hits that note, but I will say, yeah, it's one of the best horror games since the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Let's just be perfectly clear about that. But it's not without its issues. A big problem with it is the repetition. Now, it's one of these games, much like Inside or Limbo or any of the smaller games which were inspired by that. It's a puzzle platformer in which you go from left to right. If you mess up, you die and you come back instantly. And a game which is based on suspense and almost perfect timing of some aspects of the game, it can get very frustrating when you just miss it by like a fraction and you come back to it and you got to do it again. But because the not jump scare like I mentioned earlier, but because the big scare has been given away, it's not quite as impactful. It's beautifully composed and it's still absolutely skin crawling when you see what's happening on screen. But the skin crawling dread of it for that first time is undermined a little bit because you have to get these things absolutely perfectly right in the boss levels, the boss encounters, or the platforming, because of the angle, is a little bit skew with. So in the case of me, I did a lot of run-throughs where I basically just jumped off the side of a platform. Not because I wanted to, but because it's kind of awkwardly put together. However, all that being said, this is a game of staggering confidence. It takes everything of the first one. Let's just take the first one as sort of a proof of concept. A story, a game, a style, which there was them just sort of expressing themselves. It was just Tarsier just expressing themselves. It landed better than they ever hoped and builds upon everything which came before, improves everything which came before. It's better paced, it's more tense, the score is electrifying. Everything is fantastic about it. I can't recommend it highly enough. Oh yes, another thing which I appreciated about this above the original is there's a sense of hope. You are doing a lot of the game with, not on your own. It's not like the first one where you were just Six, I believe, is the character in the yellow raincoat. So you're doing this with a lot of the game as a duo. However, having that person with you, it makes you feel less alone in this very, very nasty world in which everything is out to get you. And even if you can, like, a lot of the game is based on jumping and grabbing, you can like grab the hand of Six and just walk along hand in hand. It's a small little gameplay thing. It doesn't add anything to anything, but at the same time, it just makes you feel less alone in this very nasty world. And when Six goes missing on numerous occasions throughout the game, you genuinely do miss her presence. So it's a major improvement on the first one, just by having that companion throughout you that you can hold the hand of, eco style. Which brings me to my final point. It's only 5-6 hours tops if you take your time, or if you're bad at puzzles. And the price point of 30 quid makes it a little bit of a sticking point. So if you're honestly counting the pennies for your games, this might be one to give a bit of a miss, or at least wait. However, if anything I've said has clicked with you in any way, I implore you to get this one if you weren't already, because genuinely, I'll stand by it. It's an early contender for Game of the Year. It's genuinely top stuff. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this, really. Graphics, fantastic. Some of the vista's great. Some of the ambient moments are really moody. Yeah, it's just genuinely great. I think that's me done. But yeah, please do subscribe for more video game reviews, more video game chit-chat and podcasts here at the Geek Show. And until next time, thank you for watching. I've been Rob.